wasn't that hard to find you, Toretto.
Wasn't hiding.
Last week, a team of highly coordinated drivers took down an...
Hello everyone and welcome to another video by Centipede Geek. Today I'm going to discuss my thoughts and opinions on the film called Fast and Furious 6. This film is directed by a man by the name of Justin Lin, and Justin Lin is known for directing several films in the Fast and Furious franchise, such as Fast and 5 back in 2011. He also did Fast and Furious back in 2009, and he is also responsible for the film called The Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift back in 2006. Fast and Furious 6 stars actors and actresses such as Vin Diesel, Paul Walker, Dwayne Johnson, Michelle Rodriguez, and Luke Evans. And pretty much the main plot in Fast and Furious 6 is we have Dwayne Johnson's character. He is a cop, and pretty much what he does is he wants our characters, Vin Diesel and Paul Walker, to help find a criminal. And that criminal is played by Luke Evans, and the criminal's name is Shaw. And what Dwayne Johnson wants to do them, he pretty much tells them, he's like, hey, I will let you guys go, I will give you guys, a parole, you guys will be out, you won't have to go to jail, because they're wanted men, and he says, hey, you guys will, I'll give you guys a pardon free if you guys will come help me find this villain or this criminal. That's pretty much the gist of the film titled Fast and Furious 6. Just so you guys know, I am not familiar with any of the Fast and Furious movies in the Fast and Furious franchise. I have seen bits and pieces of 2, bits and pieces of Tokyo Drift, but I haven't seen any of the films in their entirety, so I'm not going to talk about any of them. I'm only going to talk about Fast and Furious 6. So, what did I think of Fast and Furious 6? Well, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I didn't like this film whatsoever. Maybe it was because I haven't seen the previous films. I don't really know, but all I really saw this was as a mindless action blockbuster. This film, the semi-plot it did have, it wasn't much of a plot at all. I mean, this film was just action, and that's about it. When I watch a movie, I want it to have some sort of substance, that it's something that can captivate me, something that I can take away from the film, and entertain me in somewhat of a way. Well, I have to say, the Fast and Furious 6 did not do that at all. It wasn't interesting. It was mediocre at best, and probably even below that. The only reason I even remotely thought this film was, okay, was because there's about 2 action scenes that I won't say, but, one's towards the end, and it involves a plane, and if you've seen the trailer, then you've seen the scene pretty much. And then there's another scene that I thought was pretty decent. Maybe 3 scenes, actually. 3 action scenes that I can think of. But besides those three action scenes, that's about all this film has to offer. It's a bunch of, who cares about the plot, and, who really cares about the characters, because they're not really developed much at all, if you ask me. This film is a bunch of fast cars and a bunch of mindless explosions and not much of a plot at all, and overall it equaled up to be much of nothing, honestly. I couldn't get into this film if it, tried to save my life, and I tried to. I sat in the theater, this film, I believe, is, 2.5 hours long, and I tried to sit there, for the little over 2 hours the film is, and I tried to get into it, but mainly the problem was that this film was just extremely and entirely boring all throughout the film. Just extremely boring, non-interesting. I tried to get into it, but I just couldn't. I sat there in my chair, I saw it, in the prior theater, and I couldn't get into it. It was boring. I was waiting for some of the action scenes are decent, but it wasn't anything you haven't seen before in an action film. Action films such as, G.I. Joe, Rise of the Cobra, and, the sequel that came out this year of Dwayne Johnson and Bruce Willis called, G.I. Joe, Retaliation. I thought those two, for what they were, some pretty solid action films with a pretty solid plot and some solid cast members in it. I actually thought that, Channing Tatum, was actually pretty decent in both films. But with Fast and Furious 6, I didn't get that vibe, and like I said, maybe it was because I haven't seen previous films in the franchise, so I'm not really well in tune with the characters or anything like that, and maybe that's the reason, but maybe it's not the reason. I don't think that's the reason. I think it's just because the film overall was just really boring, and it was just a bunch of mindless action that's all about it had to offer. I felt like afterwards I had really wasted my time with the movie. though there are a few minor interesting things that I liked about the movie, and let's talk about some of those minor things. Like I said earlier, the action is probably the best thing about the film. There are about 3 decent action scenes. You know, the action scenes are so over the top and so unrealistic that it's not funny, but that's almost the fun of the film because, you know, it makes this film a little more funner, even though the action scenes are just so stupidly ridiculous, though that's kind of the fun of the movie, is just, you know, it being that over the top. But some of the action scenes are pretty well done, I thought. And then there's a nice little scene where we have this romantic scene. Minor spoilers coming up. There's this little romantic scene between Vin Diesel's character and then Michelle Rodriguez's character, where, you know, he's telling her, like I said, minor spoilers, where Vin Diesel's character is telling Michelle Rodriguez's character that, you know, he loves her, and, you know, they're talking about the scars, and they're like holding each other while they're laying on the car. I like that little interaction between both their characters. It was a nice little scene, and I was hoping that the movie would have more, you know, emotional and sentimental and sympathetic scenes like that, but the movie didn't have much of that, and I was also disappointed in that because I wanted the movie to have a little more substance and just pointless action, but it didn't. But that was a nice little scene between Vin Diesel and Michelle Rodriguez that I did find somewhat interesting. Vin Diesel, you know, he's pretty good in that scene. I liked him a lot in that scene, but every other scene he's kind of just walking around, you know, shooting things and blowing up things. Dwayne Johnson, you know, he's always pretty solid in the films. He has that nice, you know, I guess you could say, charismatic character that always brings some sort of presence and some sort of substance to his character, though he's not amazing. Michelle Rodriguez, once again, she has somewhat of a presence, somewhat of a character, though not amazing. But I do think if there were more sympathetic scenes between her and Vin Diesel, you know, she really could have stole the show, but they don't really, you know, give her too much credit. Tyrese Gibson playing Roman's character, he has a lot of, you know, funny scenes, and his scenes are interesting, but overall, you know, it's just, you know, I look for more in a film than comedy. I want there to be a plot. This didn't have that. And then we have Luke Evans playing Shaw. Luke Evans was a decent villain. You know, he was in, you know, the film called The Raven with John Cusack. He was pretty good in The Raven. He was decent in Fast and Furious 6, but, you know, if we were to compare him to other villains like, you know, Bane and The Dark Knight Rises and stuff, Luke Evans doesn't even come to par with that. And, you know, so even you know, even a Killian in Iron Man 3 was better than that. So, you know, he really can't compare to other villains. Anyways, that's pretty much my thoughts on the film titled Fast and Furious 6 for the Fast and Furious franchise. Just so you guys know, Fast and Furious 7 is already in production. I believe that James Wan, the previous director of Saw, Insidious, and The Conjuring, is going to direct Fast and Furious 7. Kind of an odd choice if I ask myself. But it'll be like his first big action blockbuster film, and it's a little curious to see him doing something like that because, you know, I'm not used to seeing him doing action films, so I might end up watching it just because of James Wan. Anyways, I'm pretty sure, once again, everybody is going to return. Just so you guys know, minor spoilers coming up. Another thing this film did was, this film is actually, you don't find this out to the very end, like I said, spoilers. This film is actually a prequel to one of the previous films, I believe, and Fast and Furious 7, I believe, is going to be the first sequel since Tokyo Drift or something like that. Anyways, you know, Fast 5, you know, was the past few films have been prequels, and from what I understand, Fast and Furious 7 is supposed to take place after the events of Tokyo Drift and have more of Jason Statham's character in it, from what I understand. Anyways, just wanted to give you guys that little news update. Anyways, that's my review for the film called Fast and Furious 6. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the page below, and I'll see you guys later with more videos by Cinepede Geek.